It's day 108 of the coronavirus pandemic in America, and a new study out of the UK is proposing an interesting question. Could people with low levels of vitamin D be more likely to die from coronavirus? You're about to hear a leading physician on the topic. But first, here's the latest. People with low levels of vitamin D may be more likely to die from coronavirus, according to a study by England's Queen Elizabeth Hospital Foundation Trust and the University of East Anglia. Researchers compared the average vitamin D levels of 20 European countries with COVID-19 mortality rates and found significant relationships between vitamin D levels and the number of deaths caused by this infection. This news is causing concern because many Americans are believed to be deficient in vitamin D, a vitamin produced in your body by exposure to sun. In fact, one study estimates as much as 42% of the population might not be getting enough of this essential vitamin. And that was before the lockdowns. Now, many of us are spending more time indoors than before. Former CDC Commissioner Dr. Tom Frieden recently tweeted, vitamin D supplements may potentially help fight #COVID-19 infection. So, what is the takeaway from this study? And how do you know if you're vitamin D deficient? We've compiled 5 signs of vitamin D deficiency to look out for. Keep track of how many of these questions you answer yes to. Okay, ready to go? First up, do you find yourself getting sick often? Compare yourself to others if you're not sure. Next, do you have any hair loss, especially if there's been a change? Do you have muscle cramps, even doing activities that wouldn't have bothered you? And do you have unexplained back pain? Lastly, have you had broken bones or multiple sprains? Now, if you've answered yes to any of these questions, you could be vitamin D deficient. Now that you know you might be vitamin D deficient, how can you up your levels and reduce your chances of complications from COVID-19? We're joined by Dr. David Katz, founding director of Yale University's Yale Griffin Prevention Research Center and president of the nonprofit True Health Initiative, who says we should all be working right now to increase our vitamin D levels. He just was asked to testify to the U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security on our approach to handling the pandemic as a nation. Dr. Katz, what have you been telling our leadership? What's your current view?
You know, Mehmet, from the start of this, I've been suggesting we double down on protecting the most vulnerable. We get the data we need to identify them reliably. I've been advocating total harm minimization. And that's based on the notion that there's more than one way for this situation to hurt people. Getting infected with COVID, getting a severe bout of it, obviously that can hurt people. But losing your job and having difficulty putting food on the table and depression and desperation, that can hurt people too. So we want to be sure to protect the people who are vulnerable to severe infection, but we don't want to shut down more of life as we knew it, society, cause more unemployment than we have to. So I'm basically recommending we stratify risk and apply differential approaches to different of the population and phase our way back to normal.
Yeah, you know, COVID-19 causes problems that we can all see, but they're invisible penalties we pay with sheltering in place. And I think the total harm minimization is a good way of thinking about it. So let me shift now, if I can, to some of this new research we're seeing, especially around nutrients. So a team of doctors from the UK just reported significant relationships between vitamin D levels and the number of deaths caused by COVID-19. These are preliminary results. They are not peer reviewed. So other doctors haven't evaluated this and kicked the tires on their research. But it made headlines and brought vitamin D's impact on our health back into the conversation. Dr. Katz, you didn't think much of this UK study. Why is that?
Well, it's an ecological study, Mehmet. So, essentially what it found is variations in infection rates and death rates from COVID in countries that had variable levels of vitamin D. So, for example, Scandinavian countries, less exposure to the sun, vitamin D levels tend to be lower, higher rates of COVID infection and death. But, is that a causal association? Or is that just true and unrelated? Because, populations of countries differ in other ways. They differ in terms of their policies. They differ in terms of their age distribution. They differ in terms of their climate. So I don't think anything about this particular study tells us that vitamin D is playing a causal role. On the other hand, as you well know, there's an overall context here. So is it plausible that higher levels of vitamin D may actually optimize the immune response to COVID? Yes, and it particularly because, it's a really strange disease where if you don't have a robust enough immune response, the infection can kill you. But many people seem to suffer from an excessive immune response, the so-called cytokine storm. And vitamin D actually modulates immune system responses in both directions. So, I think it does make sense to think about optimizing your level of vitamin D, not so much because of this one study, but because of our general understanding.
Now, there have been studies showing that vitamin D may be the best way for us to reduce airborne infections like this COVID-19. That's one of the reasons we put it on our initial protocol. Do you think America should be taking vitamin D prophylactically?
I thought that before we had a pandemic because, again, vitamin D is a really bizarre nutrient in the sense that it's not supposed to be a nutrient at all, right? It's a hormone. Our bodies make it when we're exposed to sunlight. But because we're dressed like this, we're inside, we live in northern climes, we don't get the sun exposure our ancestors did a long time ago. So we fortify the food supply with vitamin D to help make sure we get enough. But a lot of people don't. And when you measure blood levels of vitamin D, they tend to be low. And what a meta-analysis showed, Mehmet, is that when vitamin D levels are low to begin with, supplementing vitamin D does reduce the likelihood of getting respiratory infections. Well, COVID is primarily a respiratory infection. Vitamin D levels tend to be low anyway. So yeah, I think routine supplementation with vitamin D made sense before, and it makes sense in the context of doing all you can to defend yourself against this infection.
There's several sources of vitamin D out there, everybody. I asked my friend Dr. Mike Roizen from the Cleveland Clinic to put together the top ways you can get vitamin D into your body. So take a look.
There are 5 great ways to get your vitamin D. The first, get out in the sun. 15 minutes in the sun. Even in Cleveland, I had to put the shades down so we could do this because the sun is so bright and wonderful at activating your vitamin D. The second is fatty fish, whether it's canned salmon or fresh wild salmon at the market, or my favorite is salmon burgers. Ocean trout and sardines are other ways of doing it. Third is some fortified foods. We're talking cereal and orange juice and milk. Fourth, some specific foods like egg yolks. I don't recommend those because the egg yolks can cause inflammation by changing the bacteria in your gut. But mushrooms are a great way. Turn them over, put them in the sun. They actually make active vitamin D that way if they don't come already UV irradiated, if you will. And the fifth way, of course, is supplements. And you want to make sure you get your vitamin D. It's so important.
All right, Dr. Katz, vitamin D is just one of several nutrients that we need to maintain in order to keep our immune system healthy and vigorous. What else should we be getting into our diet?
Well, if we're just talking about nutrients at this point, Mehmet, there's anecdotal evidence of benefit from vitamin C in defending against COVID. And that's not so much a direct immune system effect as a protective effect on our healthy cells. And antioxidants like vitamin C may protect our healthy cells. Other antioxidants from fruits and vegetables do the same. The other nutrient that's clearly important is zinc. Zinc is involved in both the production and the function of lymphocytes. And that's actually the class of white blood cell most directly related to our defense against viral infection. And most Americans get less zinc than the recommended level. So taking 30 milligrams of zinc as a daily supplement, I think, is a good idea.
Now, you've argued for years about the importance of a quality diet, and you actually have a tool that can help viewers manage their nutrient intake. Can you walk us through this?
Yeah, so after 3 decades in academia, I left to run a startup company called Diet ID because we reinvented dietary assessment, which used to be quite onerous, and you'd have to do a food frequency questionnaire or log everything you eat for a week. We can identify your dietary pattern, your diet quality, and estimate your intake of 150 nutrients in under a minute. And it's fun and it's picture-based, and you don't have to remember anything. You just have to recognize stuff that looks like what you eat. But at the end of that, we can say, here are the estimated levels of your vitamin D from food and your vitamin C from food and your zinc from food and everything else. And it's really the overall pattern that's important. And before all this, Mehmet, we were a B2B company. In other words, we were licensing to businesses, to your health professionals. So your doctor could get this, your dietitian could get this, other health professionals. But to help out during the COVID crisis, we're making this available direct to consumers, so direct to viewers of the show. So they can go to dietid.com, find that link, take a quiz, and in particular, we can help identify how your overall dietary pattern compares to what's ideal for immunity.
You know, I want to thank you for your leadership and all the heavy lifting you've done to get the right topics on our radar screen. And as a reminder, the new vitamin D information is just one piece of the puzzle. It's not a cure. It's just, you know, it helps improve your overall health, I think, and getting vitamins and lifestyle changes and eating a right diet. It's always a good idea. We'll be right back.
As the coronavirus pandemic continues to ravage through our nation, one show has not stopped informing, educating, and navigating us through this difficult time. This May, the Dr. Oz Show is committed to bringing you the latest news, from health experts to first responders to personal stories of inspiration. Even though we may be apart, we will get through this together.
Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss anything. And remember to check back often to see what's new.